Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the Service Management Leadership Podcast. We have a great returning guest. Thankfully, he comes back. Stephen Ollek. How are you, Stephen?
Doing good, Jeffrey. How are you doing?
I am well. I am well. I enjoy talking to people, hearing their expertise, their knowledge. We all see this world of service management from a different lens because we bring our own baggage to the table and
Yeah, we all
experience.
got it
Oh,
too.
yes. It's kind of like relationships. We always bring our stuff and set it in the middle of the table, but it
Yeah,
colors how we see things. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation and hearing what you have to say. So let's jump
perfect.
right in. For those that don't remember, Stephen is a service management director, deputy CIO for a U.S. Army brigade. And so he brings this different lens than some of our corporate guests. And so it's interesting. Did I get the background right there, Stephen?
Yeah, you're spot on. You can imagine the Army as a behemoth organization across the globe. I specifically work in a region of the world that delivers those IT services. And we have to fit into the larger strategy and transformation, if you will, that we're going to talk a little bit about. So it's an interesting nut to crack, so to speak.
Oh, yes. And the other thing is coming out of this pandemic, nobody's impervious to this transformation, cost pressures, all that stuff. I mean, it's everywhere. So that's why I enjoy this. All right. So as we exit this pandemic, and we have this view of the future, everybody's waiting for that door to be kicked open. What do we have to do? I expect digital transformation to pick up, leaders to be told, you are required to accomplish whatever it is by the end of the year, maybe even beyond, 3 to 5 year plan. Is that your perspective as well? And how would you advise leaders as they are planning this, knowing it's coming? How would you advise them to look at the situation?
Sure. So I think, we have to set realistic expectations. You mentioned that these leaders, the executives that are out there, looking for those results that for driving their organization forward, if it's digitally, process wise, people wise, whatever it happens to be. You as a leader have to be bold enough to have that kind of level set conversation and say, look, I know you want this to achieve. Right now, this is where we're at. It gets into kind of maturity of the organization. There's a lot of eaches there. And you really need to know who you are as an organization first and foremost before you sign yourself up for these lofty goals. I think one of the worst things a leader could do is to overpromise and underdeliver. You just never want to be in that world or aspect. So first and foremost, know yourself and know what your organization is capable of doing, so that you can level set those leaders. And I caveat all of that in saying we all have a boss, unless we're all working for ourselves. But said bosses, have to hit certain marks for shareholders or whatever it happens to be. So there is a little bit of give and take, and sometimes you just have to take the directive. To add to that, Jeffrey, what I would say to you and to the listeners is, the goals and aspirations of the executives shouldn't come just from the top. We should really talk to the business and find out what's percolating at the grassroots and middle levels of the organization, because there's constant, to throw the first buzzword out of the day, innovation happening everywhere. It could be a new way of using a tool. And if we haven't learned anything about the last year, we've had to quickly pivot the way that we do work and collaborate and solve problems in a matter of minutes and moments. If we haven't proven that we're able to change and change rapidly for the better, you're kidding yourself, because we are living in this new world of rapid kind of transformation, if it's expensive or not. And then finally, what I would always say, and this is kind of, it gets to my core values, is I love to challenge everything. Just because we say we want to do this, that might have been a goal 2, 3, 4 years ago. The operational environment that we work in now could be completely different. You have to look at all of those inputs. If it's environmental factors, financial factors, personnel factors, your technology maturity and technical depth that you have. All those inputs play into said outcome that's kind of driving all of the transformation that you're looking to do. So challenge it all and be bold enough to challenge it, and then stand firm with those assertions using data driving to information and knowledge.
I'm with you on the data. So what I heard you say many things that I really like, but three, all right, the data is a given, that we have to be data, we have to be decisions based upon data. That I want to leave that. It's no gone are the gut feels and all that jazz. So I agree with you in terms of wholeheartedly of, let's have that conversation. Boss, you want platinum, but you're only willing to afford a silver outcome. Do you want to invest more, or do you want to lower those standards? Those are questions, right? And the boss still pushes back. I need this, and then you're left to try to figure it out. But and then the other piece in terms of how do we engage the business, because they have roadmaps of where they want to be. How do we partner with them so that those roadmaps are aligned? Because we don't, being in the IT technical leadership role for a long time, I know that business leaders go off to conferences, they get sold some, or told about some cool thing, and now they force it upon IT. You have to implement this. Wouldn't it be great if IT was at the table helping them make those decisions?
And that's my point. I mean, it's not about IT and the business as separate entities. It's
Right.
IT and the business doing this. And I would tell you, if you don't think you're that way already, you are. There's so many like incredibly smart and gifted people that are inside your organization, iterating on the tools that you throw over the fence and developing things that you might not be aware of. And all you have to do is just be more inclusive of those capabilities, services, tools, hardware, software, whatever it happens to be. And when you talk about those things, you don't want to be in a no kind of concept. You want to be a yes and try and take those ideas and capture them, because that's basically intellectual property of the organization that you should leverage. It's already there. And more of these platforms are coming out where they're, the low code, no code kind of solutions where you can build automated processes and apps and workflows. Why not unleash the power so that you don't have to do everything yourself? Like that's ultimately what I think most organizations are trying to do. And then, to go back to the original statement, that Cadillac kind of level or platinum level service that they want, it can be done because multiple people in the organization are going to help you get it done. So, and that's why I think when I mentioned like knowing the organization, that's how you get after it. You don't just think that you're on an island. You're surrounded by all kinds of cohorts. You just got to be more inclusive and, to your point, be at the table.
And I want to take that step further. And that was going to be my number 3. So I love you taking us this far. 5 years from now, there won't be an IT over here and a business over there. Technology is quickly sprawling throughout an organization, very quickly. And so I think gone are the IT department's legacy. I don't know what it looks like, but I know that those two are going to be sitting together, the technology and the business, in some variety. And the way we do service management, the way we think of transformations has to adapt.
I agree. And I think the more those people are empowered to iterate, innovate, solve problems with the tools at their hands, we've got to give them those intake and pipeline processes through, I'm going to use Itil version 3 contracts so people don't blow me up out there. But the service strategy and design processes that are instituted for that, the business relationship management is huge if you think about that. Demand management is huge. And then ultimately, when you get into the service design, that service design package, it can include not only IT people in that, it can include the business. And we shouldn't discount the folks that are coming into the workforce today. And I'm not saying younger people are all about this. It's everybody. We're all using technology in incredibly different ways than we did even a year ago. I know tools that I'm using now that I was not savvy on. And now I wouldn't say I'm a power user, but with the beauty of YouTube and things like that that are out there, people are there's just so much of a faster learning curve. So yeah, there's just so much pent up capability. I always believe inside organizations that, if you think that you can just go buy the solution, that you're kidding yourself.
Oh yes, and nothing is alone in technology, not even a SaaS solution, because it's got to be connected and it fits within your services. The other, you mentioned V3 terminology. Just the other day, I was talking about the warranty processes and the capacity, availability, continuous, and security, and continuity and security, however you want to look at it. And those are still today, right? You bring something on and you're like, hey, it's got to meet these four. Does it have enough capacity and availability? Is it continuous enough? And is it secure enough? I think those are going to, even with the shift, the adoption of V4, Itil 4, I think the warranty processes, some of think about like the testing V model, some of that stuff's going to endure. And, it is what it is. And it's up to us to take these frameworks and say, how can I leverage these best for my organization? Once you get in the comparison game, it all, everything's out the window, but how can you leverage it for your organization, right?
Well, and I want to pull the string on that for a second. With all of that great expertise and great things happening in your organization with we call it shadow IT, but you can call it basically the IT that you're not familiar with or outside of your traditional organization. The capacity, availability, security, all of those things have to be your foundation in concert with everything else, so that when these people bring their solutions to the table, it's not like a want like moment, right, where you say, yeah, this would be great, but our stack is 5 years old, it's out of life cycle, we need this, we need that still. So if you're not thinking about that, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. And then those people unfortunately leave, and that's just the facts of life. They're coming to work expecting things to automatically happen like that, because that's what we're all in. I mean, look at us, Jeffrey, we're talking through a computer in real-time video and audio in 1080p. This is the way things are moving, and you gotta invest in those foundational things if you're going to keep being on that cutting edge and giving yourself that what am I trying to say? The competitive advantage that you're trying to get against your quote unquote rivals that are out there.
Yeah, what differentiates you? And you mentioned that, and I would even say the speed to deliver is increased now compared to what it was. It's, it used to take 5 years, it's now 6 months. And gone are the days of Microsoft and Intel doing the planned obsolescence. Now it's how do we get things to market faster so we can leverage those new capabilities faster. And when we're talking speed, these new initiatives that these leaders have, they're going to be pressed for speed. How do I accelerate these timelines? How do I get this stuff further? And I want to kind of chuckle. If people think that the answer is always automate, you better make sure you've optimized before you automate, or you're going to get bad stuff quicker. I don't know if that's where you were going on some of it, Stephen, but in order to speed up, we have to do certain things, right? We have to have that ability to go faster. I can't take a bicycle and think it's going to be as fast as a car. It has to have some kind of core abilities. How would you advise transformation acceleration?
Yeah, so it's hard. And I would say, the agile model works in this world, in this instance. Showing value early and often is really how you're going to accelerate change. I think you insinuated it when we had our kind of pre-discussion, the multi-year kind of development project or effort is just not a thing anymore, where you're, in the waterfall, collect all your requirements and then build the design and then go implement tests in that kind of V model shape. It's throw things over small, incrementally. Make sure you're solving those core processes and capabilities that you know have to work, and then add the plus ones. We all use these, and guess what happens every like 2 to 3 days sometimes, or even every 2 to 3 weeks, we get an update. And I think that's how you do it. You start small, you increase your reliance on those users to feed you back that information constantly, and you iterate and you build, you improve, you debug, you do whatever. It's all, I mean, I'm not the smartest on the DevSecOps mentality and the continuous integration, continuous pipelines, but it's a lot of that all together. And I think if you're not looking at that, you're really doing yourself a disservice. And then I would say finally, a best practice that I've always seen, and it's really to those in the business that are early adopters and want to be part of the cutting edge and help, is kind of like having a pre-release beta program, or kind of what we call a dog food group. And we call it that on purpose, because if the IT organization isn't willing to eat its own dog food, then why would the business, even follow on to what we're trying to develop and deploy to them? So doing something like that, making it very attractive to a user to sign up for, to put themselves out there, if it's their technology with their box, their phone, their whatever, and say, hey, yeah, push me I'll be a beta or an alpha user for you and try some stuff out. I think that's how you can go a little bit quicker and really enable that faster transformation that you're looking for.
And you mentioned taking the iterative approach. We do that with everything. On our jobs, we don't wait to year 10 and say, okay, now I'm going to be good. We do it with I've been married, last week was 20 years. And so
congrats. That's great.
Well, it's more of a congrats for her for putting up with me. But, that's that whole process of how do we get better? We take feedback, we process it, we get better. And that's how we live our lives. I have a teenager, when you teach them how to drive, they go through classes, but they're still not very good drivers. And you spend time with them, you do course correct, you spend more time with them, course correct. I mean, that's how we do things. We don't do things with this big bang anymore. And it's funny because updates are still pushed out big bang, and patches are still pushed out big bang, and other things. And when they flop in big scale. And, I just think our minds are soon going to be thinking, how do we do things iteratively in everything? And our IT functions, our technical projects, how we do transformation is going to be more of the same.
Yeah, just a foot stomp again. It's minimally viable products, making sure something out there is checking the box at the end of the day to the user, and then something that our culture breeds in the Army is about after action reviews. And to throw in agilism, it's retrospectives. It's taking some time away from the work, away from the good or the bad thing that just happened, and asking simple questions. What happened? What was supposed to happen? Why did that happen? And then what are we going to do about it? It's kind of a 4 questions. It seems simple, but once you get those people in the room and you create the environment, hopefully with your culture of, no holds barred, we can be totally transparent, authentic. We're not going to judge each other. That's where the true learning at an organizational level happens. And that's where, again, another version 3 thing to throw out there, CSI occurs, continual service improvement. It's critical to always have that feedback loop all the time.
Oh, yes. And when I do process assessments, that's one of the first things I look for every process, because unless you have a mechanism to accept feedback from all stakeholders, you're not going to improve. And because they're the ones closest, you're users of your process, your stakeholders of your process. I'm not saying you give them a vote every time, but maybe they get a voice. And how do we allow that? And I'm putting you on the spot, but I think you don't care. So a lot of people really debate, hey, can Itil and Agile coexist? Can you do them together? I have my feelings, but what do you think?
I mean, why not? I know that there's some of those purists out there that say this is our kind of world, and here's our left and right limits, and here's the buzzwords and the philosophies that we believe. Then there's the evangelists for Agile, so to speak, that follow the, the original adopters who wrote the manifesto and all of that stuff. Um, Jeffrey, you've said it, and I'm going to say it again. If our listeners are getting tired of the broken record, you got to know your organization and take bits and pieces of it all, because you don't have to go all in on one or the other. What's right for your organization might not be right for mine. It might not be right for another one. You really got to understand what's the gap you're trying to solve. How are we today? How do we want to be? What's the vision? Doing the vision board kind of construct and stuff is really important. And if it includes being agile with, the Kanban method, for instance, with truly having a product backlog and people being product managers, if that's a new role to your organization, go all in on it, but make sure it's solving a problem at the end of the day. And it's not just the new flavor of the month. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but the Army and the DoD were really big on Lean Six Sigma about 10 to 15 years ago. And it was all the craze. Everybody had to get their, yellow belt. They actually created a phantom yellow belt, then the green belts and the black belts, the master black belts. But they created so much bureaucracy and process behind it that wasn't really value added at the end of the day. And now we don't talk about it anymore. And who knows how many millions or whatever that were spent on the training. I think at the individual level, it was a good thing. The folks that I know went through the training, it improved. But you really got to make sure you're still solving that problem. And, if you're not, be bold enough to just put it on the shelf or do away with it and pivot and give the reason why back to the business.
And so on Agile and Itil coexisting, I always say definitely, because if you have your product teams, let's say you can't use change management, because you will for your regulatory requirements. If something breaks, you're going to want a record of it. There's incident management. If you're going to want to know everything's tied together, there's your configuration management. I'm not saying you adopt all 28 ITIL v3 or 34 process 34 ITIL 4 practices, but they can definitely coexist, because the purpose in one does not mean it's mutually exclusive to the other. And
Jeffrey, are you saying it's not about the big banner in your office that says we're, version 3 certified?
No, it's nothing about that. And if the focus is on you, it's probably on the wrong thing, right? Or me. Yep. And but the other thing is, the part that trips everybody up that I think is not that hard, it's just somewhat vernacular, is the product teams. You have a product, you can set up your services in the same way as your product and make your product owner your service owner and go from there. It's not, I just think these are problems to solve, not things to argue about. And I'm sorry to get off track. I hear that refrain often about, oh, we're Agile, we can't do Itil, or we're this and we can't be that. And I'm like, these are frameworks. You are supposed to take them and adapt them to your point, to your organization. And it's how well your organization does and how high you want to be mature is only up to your organization. There's no competition that says you have to be at a certain level because down the street this other organization's higher. There's none of that. It's how do we, to your point, know what problem we're trying to solve.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. And Simon Sinek is coming to my mind right now. He talks about playing the infinite game. If you think that you're always in competition with your outside, folks that are in your market space or whatever, you're already losing. You've already lost. It's about bettering your organization. And I would say, if you're a leader out there and you're not investing in, at least doing that internal analysis and growing a cadre of folks that are smart on these philosophies, such as Agile, service management, Itil, whatever, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you're constantly going to just be going with the wind. And you need the people to not only be smart on that, but to challenge that status quo and say, hey, that's not a good idea. And this is why. This is, the historical information or the best practices that, typically, if you're in this world that we've called service management, you can make those assumptions and assertions because they're true. And if you make the decisions off of truth, usually you're better for it, I would say.
Right. It doesn't matter what I think or feel. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't matter. And so we're talking about accelerate transformation, talking about service management. How can service management help the accelerating transformations, those timelines? What do you think?
So service management it's the governance, and I know that's another buzzword to use, but it gives the avenue, and what we are all about at our organization, those repeatable end-to-end processes that are tried and true. We've instituted, we have buy-in. That's where the governance kind of comes in, if you need that kind of top cover, if you will. And then you make them available. You make these processes available to accelerate said change. And I guarantee you, if you think change management or incident or problem or any of these processes get in the way, they don't, because they all have an ability to pivot based on impact and urgency. To deep dive the change process, for instance, you would be very ignorant to think, if you can't have that emergency cab occur if and when something truly needs to change rapidly, if you need to insert some new technology capability, hardware, software, whatever. It's all built to be nimble and to pivot for you and for your needs. And that's why it's so critical to have these processes in place, because the more that you grow awareness for them, the more they're going to be used, and then they're more reliable and repeatable. And then, as we all know with process, it's all about the outcomes and the outputs. And once those outputs get kind of, solidified down, the quality assurance goes up. You talked about that at the very beginning. That to me is basically what's going to ensure that as you go rapid and fast, you're also going to stay at that same level of quality that your organization probably has been known historically for, which is why it's been successful to begin with.
Oh, yes. And think about your emergency changes. You brought it up. They're higher risk than regular changes because something's down, or it has to go in immediately. You don't test it as fully. You're really going to want more safeguards. You mentioned another part of change management. Who's to say you couldn't have a cab every day because you had to go so quickly? There's no issue there. Or using standard changes for your continuous deployment. This all can go in together. But I said this off air. I see service management as the guardrails for transformation. It keeps, you want to go fast, it keeps it within the parameters, and so you can go fast. And I always use the thought process of airplanes. I know some people that do work on the maintenance side of military airplanes. The quality control on those nuts and bolts is very high, very, very high. That's governance, because they want to go really, really fast. And if you go really, really fast and you have a poor quality bolt, just one of them, you're going to have issues. And so that's how I see service management.
I think everything you said is true. The analogies work, and I think if you have to consider abandoning those processes just because you want to go fast, you're not looking at it through the right lens. And hopefully they'll reach out to people like you, Jeffrey, and get that consulting advice, because I think it's value add. They're doing themselves a disservice if they're not thinking about it.
Thank you. And I just see so many people want to go fast, and they'd be like, let's go fast, but not test before we put it in production. And we all laugh at that, right? But that's the same thing about, hey, let's go fast, we'll test, but we won't monitor how good it is in production, or the quality of the change, or, hey, we've had 100 incidents on this one server in the last month. Maybe we need to take a deeper dive and do problem management. But I want to get something that down to the root of where you were going earlier. So much of it is understanding, then explaining the value to stakeholders, including leaders, because they have to understand that role. Is that reasonable?
I think so. I mean, if you have to know how to communicate that effectively and give them the why. They really need to see that. And you're going to convince them with data, unfortunately. And if it has to be financial, so be it. Hopefully your organization has those kinds of, I wouldn't say cost models in play, but at least you can tell a story with the historical information to show them, hey, you're not putting yourself at higher risk. This is the safeguards or guardrails that we have in place, and we have the right people that are going to be able to enable it. Or we've invested in this technology and it's going to enable that faster kind of throughput. I'm just trying to think out loud of our organization here. Fast fast is almost like the opposite of what the Army and the DoD is always trying to do. But I would say within the last year, seeing some of the collaboration capabilities get deployed relatively fast and people willing to take the risk, even at the user level, people are truly using something for the first time and not knowing how to log in, or there's the two-factor authentication to improve the security and all this stuff. But what came out of it all was an interesting perspective that we all have, is that we were okay to fail. We all were okay to fail because of the impact and urgency was not as high as we thought it was actually going to be. And now we're better for it because we're using a new platform that we've never had before. We always complained about said platforms that we had used before because there was some government off-the-shelf proprietary piece of software or system that the performance was always ridiculously low. So it's a completely COTS product now that we're using, and we're all cheering, but we had to go through that learning curve. And if you're willing to do that and willing to take that leap of faith, I think that just bodes well for your organization going forward. And hopefully that's one of your big things that you're going to take away from the last years of experience.
Yes, and on that note, I think the year 2020 has taught us two things. One is whatever you assumed before 2020 to be true, you cannot make that assumption today. No. In the technical world, everything's on its head and you have to see it through new eyes. But the second is, and we talked about a little bit with the iterative, gone are the one-year projects. I think of those that, you imagine last January, people have a one-year project, they have this plan, here's what we're going to do, and by June you'll have it delivered, we'll start testing. 2020 told us that's not, you don't have those thoughts anymore. Yeah, it dropped it on its head. So to use a word you mentioned a minute ago is, how can we see things through new eyes and be more nimble so that, hey, business objectives change. That's fine. How can we adapt? How can we alter course and go from there?
I believe in the yes and culture. I believe in not saying no just because it's not the right idea or concept coming from the top. And it gets to where we first started our conversation today. The business is going to drive a lot of this, and we have to be aligned to them. I'm so on that perspective because of where my history and my relationship with working has always come is from that functional or business side. If you're not doing that, you're just going to fail. But to get to your point and to the question, I think the business has to be involved. You have to be able to take some risk. We talked a little bit about that already. And then ultimately be bold, and look at things and challenge all of the assumptions that you made, and do a true deep analysis on the strategy of the organization. And maybe you're going to bring the senior leadership together more often now, instead of the one-time offsite every year that you do at some hotel down the street in a conference room. Maybe it's more, I don't want to use the word agile, but it's more iterative. It's more relevant based on the lessons learned as you go. So if it's new KPIs that you have to feed into the organization, and if you don't know what a KPI is, a key performance indicator, some kind of a metric or tripwire that's showing the goodness of what you're doing, or basically the badness. That's kind of what you want the tripwire to show you. And then constantly evaluate over and over. And I don't want to get into, it'd be more of we're always internally looking at ourselves and not outwardly focused at all. What I'm trying to make a case for now is, if you build the processes with the data the right way, like we should be now, and if COVID has taught us anything, that's what we should be doing. you should be able to pivot quicker because you have the data at hand, and it's reliable data and it's relevant data. And if you can make that assumption and everybody agree to that and say this is what we're going to do, I think you're all better for it. And that to me would be one of the biggest lessons learned, to get quicker and faster coming out of COVID.
Especially because data, what's the old adage? Data doesn't lie, just the people that use it. And
Great one.
I believe in that. The other good data quote I have that I'll drop, I forgot who said this one. I wish I could give attribution. Data is like garbage. You better have a plan on how to use, what to do with it before you start accumulating it. And because
we have a sewage system in place, right?
Exactly. And so those are two that I always gravitate to with data. So we talked about moving fast and being nimble. And on our previous podcast, you mentioned the role of knowledge management. And I think it has a role in this conversation as well. What are your thoughts on knowledge management and how it can help these types of initiatives?
Yeah, so the structure or architecture of knowledge management in my mind works like this. You identify the knowledge, you want to capture that knowledge somehow. You want to also make sure you retain it somehow. And then you want to make sure it's transferred, because that's really the ultimate outcome of knowledge management. It needs to go from here to here. If that's a person to a person, a system to a system, whatever. So in my opinion, you have to really invest in those first two capabilities, the identification and the capture. If you're not doing that already, now is the time, especially the last 12 months, all of the lessons learned, the new ways of doing business process-wise, tool-wise, you name it. Even training, throw that out there. I mean, we're all doing things differently. If you can get those two things right, you can ultimately get into the retainment, which I'm making an assumption for most of you out there, but we probably all have a platform or a system of record that is our retainment mechanism for knowledge. If it's the service management platform that you use, it could be a tool by the great company Microsoft that I won't name out loud, but it's something that's always used in that world. Mm-hmm. Or it could be something else that's kind of disrupted the way you do operations and business. But ultimately, it needs to be able to be transferred and be readily available, queryable, all that stuff. A model they always teach us is the data to information to knowledge to wisdom model. I believe that's true. We talked about the data and having that garbage kind of sanitation process. So if you're not doing all that, you're really putting yourself behind the 8 ball. I also say, and this is something I've always really been passionate about, is an intake process for this knowledge. I talked about identification and capture, but if you're not, you can identify and capture automatically, but to me, the value and the secret sauce is getting that knowledge and information from your people, from the people, not only in IT, but in the business. And how do you do that? That's kind of a $1 million question for most folks. A lot of organizations I've seen create the one-stop shop. You put your comment, question, kind of feedback into this system or tool, and it gets parsed out into however many workflows it needs to do to get to the right folks. There's the 1-800 helplines out there that usually help people out. There's the cool tier 0 kind of self-help capabilities that are out there as well. But we need to empower and incentivize, and not just not in a philosophy kind of way, but you want to give people the so what. Like, why would they sit down and take 5 to 10 minutes writing up a knowledge article on something? Put some money out there if that's how you have to do it. Make it a challenge kind of concept. Have people truly compete against one another with the number of likes or votes or comments on said piece of knowledge or information out there. That stuff can work. I think people, I'm speaking more from my own opinion perspective, but I think people really like that competitive edge and environment. And if you can build this cool thing that other people can leverage, your best practice, your idea, or your whatnot, and it becomes the new way of doing business, you've just solved world hunger for a potential senior leader, and you've flattened the whole organization. So I know I said a lot of things there about knowledge management, but that's why I'm so passionate about it, because it can solve so many problems at the end of the day. And it's not this like necessary evil to have, that Microsoft platform I talked about earlier that's always been the bane of everybody's existence. It can be really awesome if you do it the right way.
There's one that I've seen its competitor use the same way. All right, I heard you say a lot of things. I will build on 3 of them again. Go back to my magic number 3.
Yeah.
Number 1 is knowledge that is usable and able to make decisions off of on your DIKW model accelerates our transformation because it can be leveraged, and you don't have to go to talk to Joe down the hall or call someone for this. You have many companies, they'll have a run book or something of that nature. They'll have how things are. Second of all, when you talk about incentivizing, I really like the idea of having Starbucks card, $5 gift cards, whatever, for people to create knowledge. Of course, it has to be a certain quality, blah, blah, blah. Last, and then I have a story after this one, sorry. But last, I think every time you have a change that you're putting in new functionality of some kind, it has to have some kind of knowledge quotient. You have to update an article, you have to add new. How else is your service desk going to know what to do? How is your service desk going to be able to do whatever? But the illustrations I have, and I've seen this really up close twice, so that's why I can't go into a lot of detail. Companies say, hey, we want to move workforce to another country. Fine, that's leadership's prerogative. But you don't wait till then to start acquiring knowledge. Those people with targets on their backs, how anxious are they going to be to help you? The answer is not very much. And then, you try to move this transformation off, to another country. You want to do it faster, so you skip this step. And now you have people in another country who have maybe a different culture than yours. They don't know how systems. This is a true story, and a friend of mine and I were talking about this week from one of the companies. The transfer documentation for a certain system is the one you mentioned from the big evil Microsoft. I say tongue in cheek to all you Microsoft people out there, was server name and logon password. Not how often it's patched, not any of the how to maintain it. How successful do we think those people were maintaining that? And then when they left, I know. And then when they left, right, either they had a choice. Either I build up my own knowledge base or I learn it and keep it in my head like everybody else did. So when they transitioned to another account, it's go through it again, go through it again, go through it again, versus investing in it once with run books and how everything's tied together, building on it with every change and doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's funny you say that, because that's, not to dime out our culture. I'm sure everybody has their problems, but knowledge is always power, and it's unfortunate that that rings true still. I would like to think that in the future, I'm always optimistic about this inclusive nature of information, and we're all in this together. And especially in an organization, that we're all going to lean on each other for help and support. And it's not about what I know and what you know and how much I might know. And it's that I know different things and you know different things. And if we come together, magic happens. That's my my pie in the sky, being an eternal optimist kind of viewpoint. And I'm always going to wear that. And, it gets back to, we have people in our organization here that have been working for the US government, Uncle Sam, for 30, 35, 40 years, believe it or not, longer than I've been alive. And I sit down with them, and the stories that they have, I talk about their legacy. What do you want to leave behind? And a lot of people are really bent up on that. And it's not that I'm trying to play to that and tell them that this is their only way to leave a legacy, because obviously all the good work that they did is part of that. But what I tell them is, if we can just sit down and I turn a recorder on and just listen to them talk, and make me go and try and capture the data and information and turn it into knowledge. So be it. I'm almost at that point now because we're not doing anything right now to capture those lessons learned. And we always joke they could walk out the door, come back the next day as a consultant and charge us 4 times their salary, and we would pay them for it. So I'm sure it's happened multiple times.
Oh yes, one of my previous employers had average tenure in IT was over 20 years, and then they went through what I just referred to, and it's just one of those things that you just it's easy to see because obviously you think you hired good people. Obviously, you think you retained good people, or else they wouldn't be there. So why don't we treat them like their knowledge is, valuable? And not to use too much sarcasm there, but we have to build up that body of knowledge, not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. And how do we, because that, if you have a full set of run books and you know how everything's run, maybe it helps your decision making. Maybe it helps you accelerate your transformations because you have a full understanding of how the whole quilt is stitched together, so to speak. All right, so one trend I see, and we mentioned this earlier, the sprawl of technology outside of IT. I think it's in the Army too. I see it in, think of hospitals. The hospital is my go-to on this is because you see technology in the hospital rooms. You go to a bank, you see technology in ATMs because now they can scan checks and all that other stuff. Those are soon becoming technology assets and technology configuration items. We see the sprawl everywhere. Like I said, I'm sure it's in the Army. I don't want to ask you about all the types of assets and CIs you have, but you think about everywhere, all of the IoT type of stuff, the Internet of Things with cameras and security and all that stuff. It is getting everywhere. And you think, you project that out 5 years and you think, whoa, it's going to be fun. But so do you see that? And then how can we incorporate this trend into our service management program? Because we obviously feel like it has value. Yeah, I say obviously since, service management leadership is my company. Of course, I'm going to say that. But how do we handle service management in this sprawling technology world?
Yeah, it's funny you say it's fun because it is. And I think it's because you and I are so invested in what we do from our service management perspective. Again, getting back to what some of the big things I've said already, that shadow IT, the people out there that are doing from a maybe a policy or governance perspective, the things that we don't know about. It's about incorporating them in, bringing them into the fold. I think about what was it, the Catch Me If You Can movie.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot the name of that guy. He had a French name, but anyways, it escapes me. They brought him into the fold, right? After they caught him so that they could bring him in to teach them to get better. If you take that mentality, that's exactly what I think we should be doing. There's just so much capability and capacity out there. So from a service management perspective, we challenge the traditional IT model. You said it earlier. I don't even think 5 years is really the mark. It's probably earlier than that because you got to believe organizations are going that way already. But services are agnostic of IT, and I think if we consider that fact that the IT organization does not own services,
right?
We deliver services, we enable services, we might even own from a capability perspective some of them, but we don't. By and large, it's not ours to own. It's not ours to, ask for you to give us. We don't have all the locking keys to make this happen. It's just that's not the reality of today. It's everyone's, and we have to be democratic about that and open kimono about that. You mentioned all of these that are out there. There's a lot of auto discovery capability out there that could potentially sniff out the network and bring these capabilities in. You could do those deep dive kind of, discovery days, if you will, and have people come and show off their stuff. I think that was probably the right way to do it if you really want to get your hands on some of those technologies that are out there. And then, I'm saying all this, and I'm sure the cyber folks out there and security folks are thinking, you can't say yes to everything. And I agree with that. So, some of the zero trust mentality that you hear out there now, where, the capabilities that are into the network really are at a level of trust, and it's just gone are the days of just plug and play. And then the APIs, you talked about that a second ago as well, having really strong structured processes around that. All of that is enabled by service management. Just a foot stomping again. So I love shadow IT. I embrace it. I was part of it. I'm probably still part of it, even though I wear an IT hat now. That's it's something that you just have to agree that it's there and figure out your strategy to bring them into the fold.
Yeah, and it's all about talking about your value, right? If you do a great job and other people see your value, they're going to say, hey, we'll take this other and put it under your change management. I think of like the stakeholders of asset management. Finance, they want one process for onboarding new assets and decomming new assets. Security wants one process for bringing on new assets. You think of the way you do things, the way you handle incidents. Think of incident management. Are there going to be like 4 different shadow incident managements out there? No. If you do a good job, they're going to be consolidated. And the thing you have to worry about is when you don't do a good job, and now everybody, because the one thing that I would always tell people in IT, corporate IT, is you have to do a good enough job, because there are external replacements that your business stakeholders can utilize. They can spin up an Amazon client pretty quick. They can go buy something SaaS pretty quick. And so you have to be able to you mentioned a lot of times about being in sync with your business customer, but you have to be the one to build that bridge. They're not really going to come to IT and say, oh, we want you to understand. They have other objectives.
No, absolutely. And if you're not bringing them into those conversations early and often, you're going to be on an island before you know it. A big initiative, and this is public record, the DoD is looking at what we call enterprise IT as a service, to use kind of those cloudisms. And they truly want to start outsourcing IT by and large because of how poor it's been done in the past. And I'm gonna say it's a threat to like people like me that work for the government and the Army. And I'll caveat this is just Stephen Ollek's perspective and opinion. But we have to do a better job, and we have not been doing a good job. And industries come knocked on the door and said, hey, we can, you just give us the keys and we'll do everything and anything for you. So I don't want this to come across to our listeners as it's a threat. I think it's just another environmental factor that you have to take into consideration now. And if you're not, you will be left behind. The world is moving too quickly. There's too many players now, and those decisions can be made with or without you. So why not be a part of that? And I think it's going to get to the final point here. But you got to know what you're really good at as an organization and what you're not, and truly think about the investment divestment strategy that you're looking to do.
Yeah, and where you were going on that is, if you're efficient, nobody's going to be able to do a better job cheaper. But if you're not very efficient, if you're bloated, your business customers aren't getting what they need when they need it. And last few weeks, I've been on a research tear about the cost of an outage for businesses. If you're costing your business too much money because of an outage, they're going to look at options. And I don't care if you're the US Army or you're a hospital or a bank or whatever you are, we're all graded on performance. And you touched on it, but trends that you see coming down the pipe, we've talked about a lot, whether it's been cycle times coming, the convergence of traditional IT and shadow IT or business IT. I mean, it's all going to be the same. It's going to be one big glob as soon enough, because technology is going to be one big glob. Anything else you see in there?
Yeah, I think, what we see, and from our perspective, and I'm sure others as well, is, shrinking budgets, increased demand. And what I mean by that, Longer the days of old where everything's on premise. We operate and maintain every stack that we know to be true in all of our technical rooms that are out there, and we have to patch and deploy everything on those. The writing's on the wall, and the folks that hold the checkbook, they're aware of the efficiencies to be gained, so they're going to challenge that. And you have to be a part of that conversation, whether you like it or not. Either you're going to get more efficient, like you just said, Jeffrey, or you're going to look at that investment divestment strategy. So my final foot stomp of it again is you got to know your organization. What are you good at? What is your secret sauce? What is the thing that differentiates you? What is your value, not only internally but externally? What are those things you're going to hold dear and close and protect from an intellectual property perspective? And the things that that you might do somewhat well, or something that isn't that of importance, you got to look at those other organizations that could potentially do that for you. And if that's an internal organization or an external organization, so be it. And be prepared and be bold enough to outsource. I keep looking at my notes because I want to make sure I get some of these. I think the other thing that I see are we're getting back into kind of a systems of systems environment. And that's something that is somewhat keeping me up at night. I say it from a functional perspective. There's all these tools and capabilities out there. I mean, you talked about Agile and kind of ITSM in one. There's many tools out there that people are using, and then throw in the DevSecOps, capabilities that are out there, and the Git capabilities, and all these other kind of deployment and library tools. And then there's the platform out there that kind of integrates it all together using case management, or workflows that put workflows on top of workflows. That's getting really complicated, and I don't think we have the expertise in-house right now to manage all of those together. So that's another big thing that I don't know if people are thinking about, but I think to us it's on the horizon, and we're trying to figure out how do we use one platform as an app, as a front end, to all of the many, many systems in the back end, to show the information and push it back, and show and push back kind of in a rapid fashion in real time. And then finally, and this is more to the people aspect, kind of agnostic of what we've been talking about. We've been going through a year of COVID now, and what I have learned as a leader, talking with my team and others, I think people have a feeling of disconnectedness right now with each other. And the physical kind of connection is something that I believe a lot of people are really wanting and have a pent up demand for. And it's unfortunate because I think people by nature are social. That's kind of, you can read books and read reviews of these kinds of inherent characteristics. And I don't care if you're an introvert or extrovert. I think there's something to be said about being in a room and feeling the energy of people. And you can see how many times I move my hands and my face, and it's this, it's the nonverbal communication that we're not seeing, and the feeling you get from people when you're talking to them. That's a challenge or opportunity for our leaders now as we go forward, is how do we still connect people together in a virtual world? And I don't know what the answer is to that as well. I try and just do one-off coffee talks with the team, virtual offsites where we just put work to the side. We call them stop points, where you might be producing a lot of product and getting things done, but you got to look back at the process and how the team integrates and collaborates, and be willing to put work to the side and enjoy the time together as people. But I'll tell you, it's tough with this little green dot I have on my laptop and getting people to open up on this. So I would challenge those out there to think about those things, and make sure people are coming back together after all this is said and done.
I think you drove it home well there at the end and all the way through. You can have the best technology, but people execute it. You can have the best processes, people execute those. It all comes down to people. And the other trend I would say that I see coming in the ITSM world that nobody talks about is, no matter what we do in any stage of life, you go to a restaurant, maybe not now, but you consume anything and you get surveys. People are offered the ability to share feedback all the time. We in the ITSM world rarely ask for feedback. We rarely have customer satisfaction. There's even a movement for experience LA, like SLAs, but XLAs for experience.
Yeah.
That world's coming, and we have to be able to measure the experience people have, satisfaction they have when they engage with us. Service management or no service management. We spend money with people we like. I do. I go to restaurants with people I like that are, the waiter or the manager. We all spend money with people we like. And I think that's true in IT as well.
I wrote down experience level agreements. I've never heard that. That is so intriguing to me. I am going to do some research on that because I think that's a very interesting idea and concept that I believe leadership would love to get after. I think that is huge and critical. And if you're not thinking about that, that could be your differentiator between you and your service kind of quality that you're delivering out there. What a cool concept. I like that. That's awesome.
Right, because we all eat at places the food's okay, but I just like the people, right? My experience is a lot better than my taste buds. And that's how we spend money. And our business stakeholders, they want to do business with people they like. They want to have good experiences. I don't want to go deep, especially we're at the end, but think about us educating our L1 service desk. So, our callers don't, our service desk can handle L2 and L3 calls. That's experience level agreements, because now we've shortened their time. Nobody likes getting passed around. There are so many ways we can integrate this just as we look at our end to end. Sorry to go on a rant right at the end, Stephen, but I would just say that there are many touch points that we can do better.
I agree. And I mean, just look at the industry in the world with, we were in this service-based economy. You can almost make the argument that we're in that experience kind of world now where, there's 50 million restaurants, there's, that many retailers. They're all about the experience now because we can do everything online. So how are they going to still draw you in? We got to think that way. So you've given me a big aha. I appreciate that.
Hey, reach out anytime. Stephen, Ollek, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your expertise. It's been a great conversation. And I hope you have a great, great day. And hopefully you'll join us again in the near, not so near future.
I'd be happy to. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Have a great one.